Tonight, I'm going to go over what's new in the Spring 16 release, especially what's interesting to Salesforce developers. And then after I get done talking, field any questions, or if during the talk you have any questions or anything like that, just shout out or interrupt me and we can talk about it. And I'll be stopping as I'm doing stuff and going into an org and looking at the different things. So without further ado, begin. So what I want to talk about, as I said, were mostly developer related things. So mostly code stuff, for the less technical term. And then some things that are related to developer productivity. So there are some really cool new things coming out in the Lightning experience that we all need to be aware of too. There might not be code, and some of it is code, but it's worth knowing as you're a developer. There are some new objects that are being introduced, and that's always interesting. There's lots of new stuff with unit tests that will help us out, and lots of interesting things going on around sandboxes. So that's interesting to know for consultants. And then, as always, there's some neat stuff with Apex. And there's more stuff that I'm not going to cover, and I'd refer you to the Spring 16 release notes for that. So in the Lightning experience, there's some interesting things in this release. The most interesting thing to me is that person accounts are now available in a beta form. So person accounts are used in lots of situations where somebody has, or where an org has a need to represent their customers as a single person, something like a school that has students enrolling or something like that. And when Lightning first came out, you couldn't even enable it to test out inside of your org unless you didn't have person accounts. And person accounts is interesting also in that once you enable it, you can't disable it. So if you kind of wanted to test out Lightning in your org and see how it would work, and you just kind of wanted to ignore person accounts, you couldn't do that. So now you have the ability to do that. There's an enhanced notes feature, which we can look at. That's pretty cool. And then there's Visualforce for Lightning, and there's some access level enforcement if you've done any Lightning component development work that you need to be aware of. So this is what the enhanced notes look like. Let me bring up my org and I'll show you. So you can add a global action to create a note. And you'll notice here that I am just on my home page. That's it, right? But now I have this action, new note. I click that, it brings up the note. I can relate it to certain records, account, a task. Right now, the account is available because I added the notes related list, not notes and attachment, but actually notes related list to the account. If I add it to other objects, that would be available in here too. Now, here's the part that's pretty cool is, hopefully this works. So I can come over here and click on accounts, and this is still up. So I could have some note like, I want to Burlington notes or something like that. And I could be clicking through and doing different things with Burlington and taking some notes in here as I'm doing it. Click into the contact, continue to take some notes, and then when I'm done, actually save it. So you notice it's kind of like for anybody that has Gmail, it's kind of like the Gmail composer window, but it's pretty cool. Let me show you the account. So to enable this, there's a setting I won't go into it, but there's a setting. You actually have to enable these enhanced notes, and then you have to add the notes related list on here. And then you can add the new note to the global publishers. And if you want, you could also add something in here, but to the global publisher actions. And that takes care of it. You can then later disable the notes as well if you want. But I'm not sure why you would. So that's just something to be aware of if you're out there designing solutions for people. But there's it's less kind of codey and more kind of point and clicky. Let me go back to here. So the other thing that we have is the ability to have Visualforce for Lightning. So what that is this is the app builder that I have here. And in the app builder, you have different components that you can add to a page. And these are different standard components. And one of them that you'll see here is Visualforce. So if you have a Visualforce extension of a standard object, you have the ability to edit a record home page of a Visualforce object, so like the account, and then you can go in and you can actually drag on your Visualforce page section anywhere you want inside of the page layout. So here there's this account extension, visual page name. So you might have something like on the account page where you have to grab a bunch of complicated data from multiple objects that you can't just have on a related list. And you already have some stuff set up in a Visualforce page somewhere, or you want to use it elsewhere in Visualforce, or for whatever reason you're using Visualforce. Now you can just drag it right onto the page if it has the standard controller for that object that records that you're editing. So it's a pretty nice integration. One of the things is that it does run in an iframe, so you have to be careful with stuff like navigation and whatnot if you're inside of here and you're trying to actually take actions as opposed to just showing data. And I think we might end up having the ability to add like Visualforce components as well at some point. So we already have the ability to add Lightning to Visualforce pages through Lightning components for Visualforce through Lightning Out. And now we have the ability to add Visualforce pages to Lightning. So one of the interesting things when we're working with Lightning and Visualforce, and we have some common code, is the ability to detect which context we're in. So we might have something where we have to take some sort of action. We have a page and we want to style it slightly different if we're in one of the contexts. Now we can programmatically detect which theme we're in and take some certain action. And it's available server side in our Apex classes with this user info, and then in Visualforce with this user.ui theme global object. So before, the recommended way was to use JavaScript and the sforce1 object, but that makes it much harder to do things like add in dynamic CSS and stuff like that, because you actually have to manipulate the DOM. With this, you can have kind of conditional rendering on your Visualforce page, which is much nicer. So maybe you have some Visualforce page where you want to affect navigation a certain way, go back in history or something like that. You want to use the sforce1 object, or you want to do something else, or you want to style it differently, or whatever. Now you have a much cleaner way to do it. And the other thing that's interesting about this is I got to see a list of all the different themes that Salesforce has. So it's like obsolete Salesforce theme is theme 1. Interesting. Salesforce App Exchange theme is another theme. I guess that you have the ability to have some code running and that you've written and detect that theme. So this is the recommended way to go from here on out to detect it. As of this release, and there was a partner alert on the partner community about this too, is the Lightning experience is going to now enforce access level enforcement or access levels on the Lightning components. So applications, components, interfaces, attributes, and events that aren't global, you won't be able to access outside of the namespace anymore. If you've done anything with components before, you'll probably see this on attributes of components that you're using or that you've created. So you might have some sort of attribute like name or something like that, or title that somebody can set, and you didn't have it as global, and they've been using your component and they set it. Everything's fine. But when they upgrade to Spring 16, it's not going to work anymore. They'll get this error that you see here on the page, the component service, the access check failed, and the component won't load. So Salesforce is making strides towards making the components a lot more encapsulated within the DOM and completely unable to reach outside of their own component into other things. And this is part of that effort in making sure that you don't have access to anything that truly isn't global. So
here, I have a question on that. I thought I saw an updated alert that said they pushed it being a fatal error, and now it's just a warning. Is that?
Oh, okay.
Did you see that or not?
It might be. I didn't see it.
Okay.
I believe you. Okay.
But when you tried it before, it definitely it failed completely. I think I was seeing that you're going to get warnings now in Spring instead of it being fatal. I'll look while we're talking and see if I can find that.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. I haven't tested it since I got the error. I did test it and got the error, but that was about 2.5 weeks ago. So that would be good if that's been done, because there are some standard components that currently have the issue. So it kind of breaks them. So I could see that. Thank you, Carl. Okay. So there are some new objects available. And the two most interesting objects that I saw that are available are work order and work order line item, which are probably what you think they are, is what they are. They represent these tasks to be performed on a customer's product, typically in field service. So I see Salesforce moving a lot more into service and trying to be more involved in field service, and they've had other announcements around this. And this is headed towards that. So it's involved in their whole service process and account servicing. So you have this work order and work order line items, and you have an account or a case, and on the account you have assets which relate to products. So the asset states that this account has these products. It's a junction between account and product. And now you have the work order that you can create on the account that will have a lookup or a relationship to the asset, or possibly the work order line items, well, depending. And you'll then be able to incorporate that into your field service. And it works with entitlements and cases, and you can do stuff like tasks with it. So it's a more streamlined and standard way to be able to do that type of work. So as we're designing solutions for our customers or for our own code bases, this is something to keep in mind that is available, and it's available in API version 36, which is Spring and beyond. Okay. So now we're getting on to some of the fun coding parts. We have a lot of interesting new things in unit tests. One of the most interesting things to me was the creation of test suites are now available. So I'll hop into Salesforce to show this. So I can pull up the developer console here. By the way, I'm in a Spring 16 org. I'm in the pre-release org. Okay. So inside of here, I can create, hold on a second. Okay, so inside of here, I can create a test suite. So what's useful about this is you may have a rather large org where you have a whole bunch of different tests. Maybe you have one application that does something like handles your community information. You have another application that handles internal setup for community. You have another application where most of your classes are working towards some sort of payments on something. And you want to easily be able to, identify which tests go with which application. Before we just had kind of the test class name. Well, now you can put them into a suite, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive. So you can have one class and multiple suites. So I could come in here, create a new suite. Say I want to do community pages tests. Say okay, got that new suite, and then want to add some classes to it. Whoop. Grab a few here. Push them over. Then I can save that. And now I have this test suite available. So I can come in here. I can go into the suite manager if I want to look at it. So maybe there's some other subsystem suite. I can come back in. I can edit it if I want to, add more classes to it. Let's say I have new classes that I've added for testing the community. Come back in here. And the other thing I can do is I can run the tests. So I can come in and do new suite run. Then I select what I want to run. And then I can just run the suite. And it'll queue the test run and run it. So it's available via the API as well. I'm not sure if it's been built into other IDEs yet, but I imagine it will be. It's definitely available in the developer console, as you can see. Come over here. And it runs all of these tests. So I think it's a best practice going forward to use these test suites if you can to help organize your tests that you have. It's another nice self-documenting way of organizing your code base. So you get the ability to run these tests, and somebody coming into your code base can also look and see, oh, okay, if I want to learn about the community, I go into this suite and look at the unit test here to see how the code is used. It can be very helpful.
So you said that these, oh, go ahead, Tom.
I was going to ask, is that a new metadata component then? That's sweet.
Yes, I believe it is. Well, actually, I'm not sure. It's available via the tooling API. I'm not sure what is available via the metadata API. It's a good question.
And whether or not it's, is it strictly read or is it writable? Do we have the ability to pull it down from source control and maintain our suites there?
I think so, because it's available via the API.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's a good question to check into that, and I'll post something back on the meetup. Thank you. Excuse me. So then another thing about testing that's really interesting, and this works really well with orgs where you have a lot of different tests that you want to run, and is you have the ability when you're running tests. I'll go in here, come back into my suite, edit this suite. Where's this one want to go? Oh no, sorry, in the wrong place. Sorry. Okay, we'll come back to here. Switch back to my PowerPoint. So you have the ability to set the number of failures allowed before halting all unit tests. So you can do this on an individual suite that you're creating. or just a test run that you're doing in general of all different test classes. It doesn't have to be the suite. So you could specify that you want the whole test run to fail after one of them fails, or the whole test run to fail after two of them fail, or something like that. So this could be useful in a situation where when it's available via the API, you have some sort of deployment or something like that, and you just want everything to abort and to stop running after one test fails. And with this parameter, you can do that, and you can leave it, you can set it to 0 for it to fail immediately on the first one, or -1 to let it fail for, or to let it just go on as normal and not stop at any failures. So this is another useful feature that I see being put into different deployment processes as well. So then another unit test feature that is really nice is we have the ability to set the created date now. So a lot of times in our code, we might have some sort of logic that checks to see if something is available based on the created date, or sorts based on the created date, or something along the lines based on the created date. So before, we didn't have any way to really set that created date. So we had to take special care with our unit tests, or we had to design our classes to kind of abstract away the notion of a created date, work on dates independently or something like that, or just not unit test it. Now we have the ability, we can actually set the created date with this test.set created date, and we pass in the ID of the object and the date time or date that we want to use for the created date, and then you can get it back the normal way with created date and perform your tests. So it's another nice area where we've had some struggles in the past that we won't have anymore. So I think that's it for the unit test enhancements, and I'm glad that that keeps going on, because unit tests are very important. The better we can make them, the better it'll be for us. So another thing that has been enhanced, that was enhanced in winter and is again enhanced in spring, is sandboxes. So in winter 16, we had the ability to do different things with the API to actually create sandboxes based on templates. Now we have the ability to specify a class that we want to execute after a sandbox is created. So this is great. What we can do after the sandbox is created in Apex is run this Apex class. So we can set it through the UI, what class, it's the bottom part, we want to execute. So we might have some data that we want to set up, some custom settings, whatever, something like that that's not copied over or not part of a template, depending on what it is.
It's like taking a payment processor from the production gateway to
yeah, something like that. There might be some obfuscation, even something like that you might want to do. Yeah, turn off email, something like that, different settings. It could be some integrity checks too, to make sure certain things are there. There's lots of different use cases. Be interested to see if any different patterns come out for best practices and stuff like that. But then there's a sandbox context object that's passed in. So the way that you do it, you have to implement this class sandbox post copy, and it has to be global. Your class has to be global, and you have to implement the run Apex class. So be really interested to see what people start doing with that. And the other thing of interest that was done with sandboxes that's really useful is now you have the ability under data management to look at the status of your sandbox, like what's going on with it. So if you put in a request to create or refresh a sandbox, in the past you'd put in that request, and then you just wait to see when it got done. And there might be an issue or something like that happens, and you're not aware of what's going on. So you wait a little longer, and then you put in the case with Salesforce support, and then they get back to you. Now you can look.
Waiting again before they get back to you.
So that might happen. And then you can go in and you can look and see what the status is. And if it's started, it'll be and if it has changed to suspended or stopped, and it's been like that for greater than an hour, then your instructions are to call Salesforce support, and get them on the horn right away, talk to them and see what's going on. So you have that kind of insight into what's going on. Can definitely help and save some time. And then one last thing that happened with sandboxes that's really interesting is we have more sandboxes, many more sandboxes with these are developer edition sandboxes. So Salesforce development, there's a lot of people are doing a lot of different things with it. And over the past just 3 or 4 years, we've seen the number of apps being created, the number of custom pages and everything being created. And bless you. The more developer edition sandboxes that you can have, you can I think the software development practices have become a little bit more mature in Salesforce too, and people have figured out how they can work with multiple developers and multiple sandboxes on the same project and stuff like that. So the demand for having more developer sandboxes is there, and Salesforce has recognized that. And now you're getting in spring, Enterprise went from 1 to 25. I mean, that's pretty good. Performance Edition, now you have 100. So if you have a large org and you have a whole bunch of different things going on, you don't have to worry as much about is this allocated, or who's going to use this now, who's going to use that now. I mean, you still shouldn't be careless. You should manage it, but you've got a lot more. So then moving on to some Apex changes, the site class has had some noticeable updates. And the two that were most interesting to me are the is valid username. So that's pretty useful. If you're running in a community and you need to know, is the username that's been provided in a registration or something along those lines, or that's being changed to, maybe you have a user management page inside of your community that you've written that's custom. Now you have the ability to call this, is it a valid username? You don't have to parse something out or try to create something off to the side, something along those lines. And then the other one that's really nice is validate password. So in Salesforce, you can set up different password requirements and different password settings. And to try to reproduce that inside of your community, it would be ridiculous. You could probably just, you would end up probably just hard coding in something like it has to be this or it has to be that, or doing something along those lines, and then updating if it ever changed. Well, now you have the ability to call this method in the API, pass in the username, the password, and the confirm password, and it'll validate, is that password okay, and return back true or false if it is or it isn't. There's also another method where you can get back the password, the current password configuration. I didn't look into that as much, but I think it has to do with the settings that you have for the password in your org. But definitely helpful for anybody doing any work in communities, or if you or anything along those lines, user management. So then the other thing of interest is Apex PDF generation. So a lot of us will do work where we have to generate some friendly version of a report or some friendly version of a Visualforce page for printing, receipts or work orders or something along those lines. There are some nice apps on the App Exchange like Conga, Composer, and stuff like that that are good at doing that. But a lot of times we have to do our own custom ones as well. And there's the way that you can do that in Salesforce is through the page reference get content or get content as PDF, and you pass in a Visualforce page, and or you can pass in other things. But in this case, you pass in a Visualforce page, a local URL of Salesforce, and you get back the content as a PDF. And there have been limitations on what you can do with that in the past, when you can call it without getting errors. So in the Winter 16, but one of the things that was added was you have the ability to do it from batch context. So that's really nice if it's local. So that was great. So now you can call it from a batch context. So you could schedule a job to run and create PDFs of certain information through your batch job. And now you have the ability to call this after a DML statement. And you can also call it after a save point is set. Save point is treated like DML, so it's basically the same. So you might do some DML, insert something or something like that. Now you can call the page reference get content or get content as PDF. The only restriction is it must be an internal URL, so like your Visualforce page or something like that, which I would imagine are most of the use cases. So
now that doesn't have an impact upon whether or not the save that you know. Let's say you do a DML statement, you perform some save prior to calling get content as PDF.
The transaction context?
Yeah, the transaction context. It still doesn't have access to your saved data.
I don't know.
It's just a matter of you don't have to be concerned about the order of
I don't think
performing a DML operation before call out.
I don't think that it does have access to it, but I want to test that. I haven't tested it yet, but I would like to test that. I don't think it does. So what Tom is referring to is right now, one use case you might have for creating a PDF is you might have some sort of page or something like that. And on it, your process is you save some data that's inputted on the page, and then you immediately want to create a PDF. So the way that you do it is you take the input from the page, you save it, and then you call get or page reference get content, and you want to generate this PDF, and you want the data and you pass in the ID of whatever you were saving. Your page reference get content queries back out data and then tries to print it on the Visualforce page. But the problem is that the way that the system works is it doesn't get the updated data. It gets the data prior to the DML statement. I think that still happens. And it's just because of the way behind the scenes transaction contexts work within Salesforce and Apex. I think that still happens, but I would like to test that and see, because that would be nice. Right now, the workaround is to do things like use page actions. So you save and then you return back to the Visualforce page, and your immediate page action is to create a PDF or something else with Future or something along those lines. But yeah, that's a great point. It's really low level, but interesting. I think that covers most of what I wanted to talk about with respect to the developer enhancements for Spring 16. We talked about the Lightning experience and what was new in that. We looked at the notes that were very interesting, that you can have the note window at all times and navigate throughout Salesforce One without ever closing it, and then gather any information you want and save it. We looked at the Visualforce for Lightning experience, which is very convenient, especially if you want to start using the Lightning experience. You have some existing Visualforce that you might be able to pull in, depending on how small it is. Or if you have a Lightning, or if you have a Visualforce component, you can always wrap it with a Visualforce page and then drag that in. And we looked at some of the enhancements to sandboxes that can help with productivity. I think most notably was the posts copy script that's now available. It's very helpful. And we looked at some of the changes to Apex as well. So what you can do now is you can look into the release notes and the release webinars. There are all kinds of webinars. There's a developer webinar that was done like a week ago, and it's up here at this URL. I'll post the video for this as well. You can get a pre-release org. So the Spring 16 is available. You notice the URL on there, Spring 16-partner, and the rest of that URL. So Summer will eventually be available in a couple of months, and you'll be able to go to that same URL, but switch in Summer 16 instead. So our orgs will be updating to Spring 16 over the next couple of weeks as well. And then finally, I always want to plug Trailhead. If you're new to Salesforce, or if you want to just learn about a specific topic, Trailhead is a great place to go to start learning Salesforce's interactive learning experience. And then finally, does anybody have any questions?